My wife made a joke about my size at my birthday. By Sunday, she had nothing left. Not the $14,000 she'd quietly moved. Not her claim on the building I bought before I ever met her. Not the story she'd spent a week carefully telling everyone else. I found out about the transfer at 9:47 p.m., standing in a restaurant bathroom, while 40 feet away she was still smiling at the table she'd arranged. I almost put my phone back in my pocket. I almost walked out and said nothing. The wrench-shaped bottle opener Darius had given me as a joke gift was sitting beside my plate. I left it there when I went to the bathroom. I took it when we left. The reservation was for 8. Danielle had sent the invitations, which meant she'd also curated the guest list. Her friend Carla, her friend Priya, her sister Simone, a couple named Josh and Becca, who I'd met exactly 3 times and who referred to my wife with the easy shorthand of people who saw her constantly. Theo was there, seated at the far end of the table, where you put people you're being polite about. No Darius. Danielle said the invitation must have gotten lost somewhere. I didn't push it. The restaurant was her choice, too. Good food, low lighting, a private room, with a heavy wooden door that muffled the main dining room. I'd loosened my tie on the way in, and I was carrying a small gift bag because Darius had handed it to me at the office that afternoon, and I hadn't had a chance to leave it in the car. The bottle opener was inside, wrapped in tissue paper printed with little wrenches. He'd found it at a hardware store. I'd laughed. I sat down, ordered a drink, and the first 40 minutes were fine. Theo was telling a story about a job site, and I was actually relaxed, which I haven't been at a social event in longer than I could honestly say. Danielle was across the table from me, and she looked good, and she was laughing at something Carla said. And I remember thinking maybe I'd been wrong about the feeling I'd been carrying around all week, that things between us were cooler than they should be, that she'd been on her phone more than usual, and that she'd stopped asking how my day went, which sounds small until you notice it's been 3 months. Then she stood up to give a toast. She started warm. She mentioned my work ethic, said I'd put everything into building something, mentioned the apartment, and how I was always saying it felt too cramped. She smiled at me across the table. Then she said, "And I am going to give you the exact words because I have replayed them enough times to know I'm not misremembering. Marcus always complained the apartment was too small. I guess everything feels small to him." Carla laughed. Priya laughed. Josh made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but was adjacent to one. Simone smiled and then looked at her bread plate. Theo did not laugh. He looked at me with an expression I recognized because he's known me for 17 years, and that was the expression he used when he wanted to check whether I was okay without asking in front of people. I said, "Classic." I smiled. I picked up my glass. Here is what I was actually thinking. Not about the joke. Not yet. Not directly. I was thinking about a Thursday evening habit I had developed 2 years ago when Robert and I started the LLC. I check the accounts every Thursday night, not because I don't trust anyone. It's the same reason I keep contractor invoices for tax purposes, the same reason I photograph signed estimates before they go out. I just like knowing where things stand. I'd checked the personal accounts Thursday afternoon before leaving the office and everything was fine. But I hadn't checked the joint renovation account, the one tied to the duplex. I excused myself to use the bathroom. The renovation account showed a transfer executed at 2:14 p.m. that afternoon, while I was at a job site in the north part of the city watching a crew replace a rooftop unit. $14,000 moved to Danielle's personal checking account. The account balance had been $17,200. She'd left $3,200. I stood at the sink and looked at my own face for a few seconds. Then I fixed my collar, which didn't need fixing, and walked back to the table. I ordered dessert. I asked Danielle what she wanted. She said the tiramisu. I said good choice. She smiled at me like the evening was going exactly as planned, which I would later understand. It was. In the car on the way home, I waited until we were 2 blocks from the restaurant. Then I asked her if she'd moved money from the renovation account that day. There was a pause that lasted maybe 4 seconds. She said the account was both of ours, and she'd needed to cover a vendor deposit for a work event. She said it the way you say something you've practiced saying. I said, "Okay." I pulled into the garage. I set the gift bag on the kitchen counter. She went upstairs, and I sat at the kitchen table with my phone and pulled up 3 years of renovation account statements and saved every single one to my work cloud, the one I control, not the shared family folder we use for vacation photos and grocery lists. Then I searched the tablet we keep on the kitchen counter. We both use it. I opened her message threads and searched the word duplex. then building, then your renovation. She'd sent me 41 messages over 3 years that contained one of those phrases, and in not one of them did she refer to it as ours. Your building is looking great. When are the guys finishing your renovation? Your investment is going to be worth it, babe. 41 messages. I took screenshots of every relevant one and saved those too. It was almost midnight. I went to bed. She was already asleep, or pretending to be. Friday, I called Theo from my car before going into the office. I told him what I'd found. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "The joke wasn't a joke, was it?" It wasn't really a question. I asked him to send me a text describing what he'd seen at the dinner, just the facts, how she delivered it, what the room did, how it landed. He sent it 11 minutes later, 3 paragraphs, clear and specific, no editorializing. I called Raymond Fitch that evening and left a message. Raymond had handled my duplex purchase 4 years ago, before Danielle and I got married. He was the kind of attorney who returned calls the same day. Then I sat down with Danielle. Not to argue. I was specifically not going to argue. I put 2 printed account statements on the kitchen table and asked her to explain the transfer more specifically. What vendor, which event. What they'd needed $14,000 for. She said I was monitoring her. She said she was a full partner in our life. I asked her, "Are you a partner in the building specifically?" She said she'd put 4 years into that place. I said, "Your name isn't on the deed." She said, "That's exactly the problem." Then she picked up her phone and went upstairs. I moved the remaining $3,200 from the renovation account into a personal savings account in my name only. I had every legal right to do this. It was a joint account, and she'd just demonstrated exactly what joint meant to her. Raymond called Saturday morning at 9 o'clock sharp. I went to sleep on Friday, not knowing she'd already packed an overnight bag. I went to sleep not knowing she'd already called an attorney. I went to sleep not knowing that when I woke up Saturday at 6:40, her car would be gone, and her expensive toiletries would no longer be on the bathroom shelf. I stood in the bathroom doorway and noticed the empty space where they'd been. I was holding a cup of coffee. I took a sip. I thought about the tiramisu and how she'd said good choice, like everything was normal. The wrench bottle opener was still on the kitchen counter in its tissue paper. I left it there and went to wait for Raymond's call. Raymond picked up exactly at 9. I'd made a second cup of coffee and was sitting at the kitchen table with the printed statements in front of me, the screenshots open on my laptop, and the specific calm of someone who has already made a decision and is now just getting the paperwork right. I walked him through it. The duplex purchase 4 years ago, pre-marriage, my name alone on the deed. The renovation we'd done over the following 2 years, funded almost entirely through a personal loan in my name and premarital savings I'd kept in a separate account. The joint renovation account we'd opened because it was easier to track expenses from one place. My choice, convenient, not legally obligating. The $14,000 transfer. Danielle's texts. Raymond listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "The deed is clean. Separate property is separate property in this state, as long as you didn't execute a written agreement changing that status. The renovation adds value, but value isn't ownership without documentation of a co-ownership arrangement. Do you have the original closing documents?" I said, I thought so, but I'd need to check. He said to get them and call him back. He also said I should document the timeline of the transfer carefully, and that moving the remaining balance was legally defensible given the circumstances, but that I should be prepared for it to be characterized otherwise. He said that carefully, the way attorneys say things they want you to hear but don't want attributed to them in writing. I called my mother after I hung up. Patricia Webb is 61 years old, keeps a filing cabinet in her spare bedroom organized by year and category, and witnessed my duplex closing because I'd asked her to come and she'd taken the day off work to do it. I hadn't thought about those documents in 3 years. I'd left copies with her because I'd said, and I remember saying this now only because she reminded me of it Saturday afternoon, that I wanted a backup somewhere safe. She asked me once if that meant I didn't trust my living situation. I said I just liked having a backup. I drove to her house at noon. I didn't tell her everything, just the broad shape of it. She went to the spare bedroom and came back with a manila folder, original deed, survey, closing statement, title insurance documentation. She set the folder on her kitchen table and sat down across from me. "Do you have a lawyer?" she said. "I called Raymond this morning. She nodded. Then she got up and made me a sandwich, and we talked about our neighbor's new dog. And she did not make me explain anything further, or tell me what I should feel. That is one of the things I have always been grateful for about my mother. I drove back with the folder on the passenger seat and called Darius from the car. Darius Okafor is my business partner and a CPA by training, which means he processes financial information the way I process ductwork layouts, methodically and with a low tolerance for unexplained gaps. I told him what was happening. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "I need to tell you something." 6 months ago, he'd run a reconciliation on our LLC accounts after a minor discrepancy in a materials invoice. Routine, he said. While he was doing it, he'd come across an email Danielle had sent him, to his work address, not through me, asking casually whether partners' spouses had any claim to LLC equity in our type of operating agreement. He'd written back politely, explaining that, without a separate written agreement between all parties, that wasn't how it worked. He'd filed the email and hadn't mentioned it because, at the time, it seemed like a general question. Maybe she was curious. Maybe she'd read something. "I'm sending you everything right now," he said. His email to her was 2 paragraphs. Professional, clear, unambiguous. No, spouses don't inherit LLC equity by default. No, there is no mechanism in our operating agreement that creates that right. He'd CC'd our business attorney on the response, which meant there was a time-stamped record sitting in 3 separate inboxes. She'd known for 6 months that the LLC wasn't reachable. She'd asked the one person who would know, gotten a definitive answer, and then proceeded anyway. I pulled over for a minute when I processed that. Not dramatically, I just needed to not be driving. I got home at 3:30 and sat at the desk in what we used as a second bedroom and had been using as a home office since Danielle's decorating decisions had gradually moved my things there. I scanned the folder from my mother. I compiled the renovation account statements, the screenshots of Danielle's texts, Darius's email to her, his full documentation package for the LLC, Theo's description text from Friday. I started a plain timeline, dates, amounts, actions, no commentary, because Raymond had asked for it. At 6:14, I checked my phone and saw Carla had posted an Instagram story. The text read, "Sometimes you outgrow people." She'd used a filter that made the background look like a sunset. I took a screenshot with the timestamp visible. Then I checked whether Danielle had posted anything. She hadn't, but she'd liked 3 of Carla's stories in the last hour. I put my phone face down. At 8:40, Simone called, or tried to. It went to voicemail. 30 seconds later, I got a text from her that said, "Did you bring the paperwork from the attorney? She said to have it ready Monday." 4 seconds after that, "Sorry, wrong thread." I looked at that message for a long time, not because I was surprised exactly, but because seeing it written out, the paperwork from the attorney, have it ready Monday, made a shape I'd been sensing all week become solid and specific. She hadn't just talked to an attorney. She had paperwork. She had a timeline. The birthday dinner, the transfer, the toast, the car keys gone Saturday morning. None of it was impulsive. I wrote back to Simone. No problem. At 9, Danielle called from her own number. Her voice was softer than it had been Friday night. She said she needed space to think and asked if we could talk civilly. I said, of course, and asked what specifically we'd be talking about. She said the marriage, the future, what we both wanted. I asked, "And the duplex?" Pause. She said she thought we needed to discuss what was fair. I said, "Let's do that Monday with both attorneys present." She said I was making it adversarial. She said she was just trying to have a conversation. There was something in her voice I recognized. Not anger yet, something more careful than anger. She was recalibrating. I said, "Monday works. Raymond will be available." After we hung up, I sent her one text. "If you want to talk before Monday, I'm available. I'd need us to start with the Thursday transfer." She didn't respond for 4 hours. At 1:17 a.m., she sent, "I don't think that's a productive place to start." I saved it and went to sleep. Sunday, I finished the file. I had the deed originals, scanned and printed. Renovation account statements going back to the account's opening date. The text message compilation, 41 messages sorted chronologically, each one her referring to the duplex as mine. Darius's documentation package, the email chain showing she'd asked him directly about LLC equity and been told no. Theo's account of the birthday dinner, Carla's screenshot, Simone's accidental text, and the 4-second timestamp gap between it and the correction. I also pulled every contractor invoice from the renovation. I kept them in a work folder because I file business expenses carefully, and the duplex renovation had involved enough subcontractors that I'd wanted clear records. Total renovation expenditure, $67,400. Of that, I could document $66,600 as coming from my personal loan and premarital savings. Danielle had contributed $800 in paint and light fixtures, which I knew because I had the receipts with her card number on them. I'd kept them for tax purposes. I found a photo from 3 years ago while I was going through the phone looking for something else. Danielle had taken it, me and Theo and Darius, on the second floor of the duplex, painting the walls mid-renovation. She'd posted it with the caption, "My husband's project, my heart." I looked at it for a minute, then I kept scrolling. Around 3 in the afternoon, I made coffee and sat at the desk and felt, for the first time that weekend, something close to tired. Not defeated, just tired in the way you get when you've been holding your posture carefully for 2 days straight. I thought about calling Theo, but didn't want to perform being okay. I thought about the version of Danielle that had existed in the first year, who had been genuinely funny and easier to be around than anyone I'd met in a long time. And I let myself think about that for about 4 minutes before I went back to the file. At 3:47 p.m., my email notification went off. The subject line was correspondence from Hargrove and Lynn, family law. I opened it. It was a demand letter, 4 pages, formally addressed and dated that day. She had filed for divorce. Her attorney was claiming equitable interest in the duplex based on Danielle's contributions during the marriage. They were requesting a full financial disclosure of Webb and Okafor LLC. They were also characterizing the $3,200 transfer I'd made Saturday as retaliatory dissipation of marital assets. I read all 4 pages, then I read them again. I forwarded the PDF to Raymond with a 2-line message. Received this afternoon. Available Monday morning. He responded in 4 minutes. 7:30 a.m. Bring everything. I set my phone down on the desk. The wrench bottle opener was sitting at the edge of the surface where I'd moved it when I cleared space for the files. I picked it up and turned it over once, then set it back down. I thought about the tiramisu. Good choice, she'd said. Raymond's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, where the elevators were slow and the waiting area smelled like old carpet and expensive coffee. I was there at 7:22. His assistant let me in at 7:30 exactly, and Raymond came out of his office in his jacket already on, which told me he'd reviewed the PDF before I arrived. We sat down, and I put the folder on the table between us. He went through it methodically, the deed first, then the closing statement, then the renovation account statements, then the text compilation. He paused on the texts, read several of them, set them down, and looked at me over his glasses. "She called at your building 41 times in writing," he said, "give or take. And she signed nothing claiming co-ownership. No written agreement, no addendum to the deed, no documented financial arrangement." "No." He picked up Darius's email chain, read it twice, set it down more carefully than he'd set down anything else. "Here's what Raymond explained to me in the next 20 minutes. And I'm going to give you the condensed version because he is thorough in a way that is professionally admirable and personally exhausting. The duplex was separate property. Clear documentation, consistent premarital origin, no written agreement converting it during the marriage. The renovation value argument, the idea that her contributions had created an equitable interest, was the weakest possible version of that claim because her documented financial contribution was $800 and because her own text messages established her consistent understanding that the property belonged to me. The LLC claim had already collapsed before the letter was sent because Darius's email proved she'd explored that avenue 6 months ago and received an unambiguous answer from the person best positioned to give it. The retaliatory dissipation claim about my $3,200 transfer was going to run directly into the timestamp, showing her $14,000 transfer had occurred 38 hours earlier. "They led with their weakest cards," Raymond said. "Is that good? It means they were hoping you didn't have documentation." I had documentation. He called their office at 9, and I sat in the waiting area with the old carpet smell and a cup of coffee that was actually quite good while he talked. I checked my phone. Theo had texted asking if I needed anything. I wrote back that I was at the attorney's and would update him later. Darius had sent the full LLC package to Raymond's email at 7 a.m. without being asked, time-stamped, professionally formatted, with a cover note that read, "Let me know if you need anything else. I have more." I did not check Danielle's social media. I had made a decision about that Saturday, and I was keeping it. Raymond came back out at 9:42 and sat down across from me. "They've already retreated on the LLC," he said. "Once I mentioned the email chain, they didn't pursue it. The duplex argument they're still holding, but their basis is thin. They're proposing a $22,000 settlement for marital contributions to property appreciation." I thought about what $22,000 would mean. It wouldn't destroy me. It also wasn't something she'd earned. "What did you tell them?" "That we'd respond in writing." He picked up a pen. "Here's what I'm sending back. Her documented contribution to the renovation is $800, which I can prove with receipts bearing her card number. Her own communications establish she understood the property as yours throughout the marriage. We are not offering a settlement on the duplex. We are requesting the return of the $14,000 transfer to the joint account for proper marital distribution. If they want to proceed to litigation on the duplex claim, they can explain to a judge why their client's 41 written references to the property as her husband's should be disregarded." I said that sounded right. He sent the response Tuesday afternoon. I went to work Monday and Tuesday the way I always go to work: job sites, estimates, a Tuesday afternoon meeting with a general contractor about a hospital expansion that Darius and I had been chasing for 3 months. The general contractor shook my hand at the end and said he thought we'd be hearing good news by the end of the month. I drove back to the office and wrote up my notes and did not think about Danielle's attorney for approximately 2.5 hours, which was the longest uninterrupted stretch I'd managed since Thursday. Wednesday morning, Raymond called at 10. Hargrove and Lynn had countered at 8,000. Raymond had declined. They'd then proposed 5,000. Raymond had declined that too and reiterated the $14,000 return request. At 2:17 Wednesday afternoon, Danielle's attorney sent a settlement agreement. $0 on the duplex, return of the $14,000 to the joint account within 5 business days for equitable distribution, each party retaining individual assets, the divorce proceeding on standard no-fault grounds. Raymond emailed it to me with a one-line note. "Recommend acceptance. This is the right outcome." I read the agreement 3 times, then I signed it electronically and sent it back. I sat at my desk for a while after that. Not long, there was an estimate I needed to finish. That evening, Danielle called from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up. I'm being honest, I almost let it go to voicemail because I knew what the call would cost me emotionally, and I'd had a reasonably functional Wednesday and I wasn't sure I wanted to spend it. But I picked up because I think some part of me was still waiting for the conversation where she explained herself in a way that made sense, where there was something I'd missed that would reframe it. There wasn't. She said her attorney had pushed her into positions she didn't want. She said the joke at the birthday dinner was just a joke, and I'd weaponized everything. She said she'd never meant for it to go this far. I asked her what she thought was going to happen when she moved $14,000 and retained a divorce attorney before my birthday dinner was over. She said she thought I'd fight for us. I held the phone and looked at the window for a moment. Outside, it was an ordinary Wednesday evening in a city that had no opinion about my marriage. "I did fight," I said. "I fought for what was mine." She said she missed me, and here is the part I'm not going to perform for you. I believed her. I think she probably did miss something, though I'm not sure it was me specifically, as opposed to the version of the arrangement that had been working in her favor. That distinction matters, but it doesn't make the missing less real, and I'm not interested in pretending it does. I said, "I hope the event planning goes well, Danielle." I ended the call. The next morning I changed the security code on the duplex. The previous code was her birthday, which I had set 3 years ago without thinking much about it, and which now struck me as the kind of detail that accumulates meaning only in retrospect. I set it to a 6-digit number with no personal significance. I also called the bank and had Danielle's authorization removed from the renovation account, which was being closed anyway as part of the settlement, and I confirmed the incoming $14,000 transfer with the branch manager, a patient woman named Gloria, who had helped me open the account 2 years ago and who processed everything without comment. I texted Theo, "It's done." He called instead of texting back. He asked if I was okay. I said I was okay, in the way people say they're okay when they mean they're functional, and would rather not discuss the specific texture of not being fully okay. He understood this because he's known me for 17 years, and he said he'd come by Saturday if I wanted company. I said that worked. I did not block Simone. I have no quarrel with Simone. She sent an accidental text because she was kept in an arrangement without being fully consulted on its costs, which is a dynamic I understand better than most. I didn't contact her either. Some things don't require a resolution, just distance. I blocked Danielle on my personal phone and kept Raymond's line open for any correspondence that came through counsel, which it hasn't. I did not respond to Carla's Instagram story or any of the 3 vague check-in messages I'd received from mutual acquaintances over the previous week. I didn't post anything. There was nothing I needed the public to know. The following Saturday, I drove to the duplex. The second-floor tenant, a woman named Adrienne, who'd been there 18 months and paid on time without exception, had left me a note about the thermostat in the upstairs unit cycling irregularly. I let myself in with my key and went upstairs and looked at the thermostat. It needed recalibrating. Simple fix, less than 5 minutes. Adrienne made coffee while I worked and asked if everything was all right with the building. I said yes, everything was fine, the building was in good shape. After she went back inside, I stood in the hallway for a minute. It was the same hallway from the renovation photo. Same walls, same light from the east-facing window at the end. We'd painted those walls over 2 weekends, me and Theo and Darius. Danielle had taken the picture and posted it with the caption about my project and her heart. I'd thought that was generous of her at the time. I'd thought it meant something about how she saw us. I took out my phone and took a picture of the empty hallway. Same angle, different light, no one else in it. I didn't post it. I saved it next to the old one. I put the phone back in my pocket and felt the bottle opener there, which I'd grabbed off my desk without thinking when I left the apartment that morning. The wrench shape. Darius's terrible and perfect birthday joke. I'd been carrying it around for a week in various jacket pockets without deliberately deciding to. I walked downstairs and locked the front door and stood on the front step for a moment in the Saturday morning cold. Then I drove home. There was an estimate on my laptop that needed finishing, the hospital expansion, the one Darius and I had been chasing. I sat at the kitchen table and opened the file and started typing numbers into the columns. The folder with the settlement paperwork was on the corner of the table. The bottle opener was next to it. The photograph of the hallway was on my phone, unseen, sitting next to its 3-year-old companion. I didn't look at Danielle's number. I didn't look at Carla's Instagram. I typed the estimate, and the numbers were specific and the work was real. And outside, it was an ordinary Saturday, and that was enough.